So, Al, what game do you think we're going to be covering today on Console Shock?
What kind of genre?
Well, you can like see. Can you see what it is?
Oh, right. Oh, kind of like a beat 'em up kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty much, yeah.
Tekken.
No. It's not Tekken.
Virtua Fire.
No, it's not.
Dead or Alive.
No. You're getting warmer. You're definitely getting warmer.
Soul Calibur.
No, it's you consider like Capcom. Fighting game.
Marvel vs. Capcom.
No, not Marvel vs. Capcom. Try again. Capcom.
Yeah.
Fighting game.
Yeah, and
Come on, yes.
Mortal Kombat. Trev. Trev.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 3 of Console Shock.
Episode 3.
As it would be if we were in France.
Or Canada, in the French regions.
Or, as I like to call it, you like being in the French regions, as I like to call it, Canadia. Yes. Anyway, so today we're doing yet another game, aren't we? And what game is that?
Outdoor Brawling 2.
Also known as Street Fighter 2. Actually, that's a good name, Outdoor Brawling 2. So there's loads of different versions, isn't there, Al?
There are several different versions.
There's more than 2, let's put it that way.
Yeah, and we're not just talking like part 1 and part 2. I don't know why I'm doing everything in French now.
Yeah, I know, because you came back from Canada. But
so, well, I think it wasn't even in the French region. Anyway, but yeah, like Street Fighter 2 got released over and over and over again.
Like that single game over and over again.
Yeah, they even just made it faster.
Exactly. And with a few extra characters that were in the other games but were available to choose to play as, weird stuff like that. But anyway, what we're going to do is each of us have kind of a version of the game that we particularly like. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at them, talk about them, go through our favourite memories and things we enjoyed about the different versions, and yeah, hopefully you guys will enjoy it. So we're going to talk about Street Fighter 2, and also there are lots of variations of Street Fighter 2. We're just going to do a general overview of kind of our favourite ones. Later on we might do individual ones.
Yeah, and like a lot of Capcom games, it did start out as an actual arcade cabinet game, so and became very, very popular, and then when it was ported to home systems, like people went crazy for it.
Well, yeah, I mean it actually kind of saved the arcades in the early 90s. I mean, from about the late 80s, after the initial boom sort of died down, arcades kind of died, and then Street Fighter 2 basically single-handedly revitalised them. People would go and queue up to play Street Fighter 2. There'd be people that have little tournaments that they would organise on the spot in their favourite arcades.
And that's when people tried to figure out all different combos and everything. And that was when it became a real big thing for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and it was because it was layered with all these different little things you could like master, and all the different characters. Like initially it's 8 in Street Fighter 2, the very first edition, and they all had their own special moves. They had a level of depth that wasn't really in any fighting game up until then. And to be honest, to this day, fighting games aren't that much different to Street Fighter 2. It's still 2 people and an energy bar and special moves.
Yeah, such as Blanca, this green beast who can electrocute people who touch him.
And it's really irritating because he just cannonballs all over the screen, but I don't want to go back to the pain that I felt losing to him repeatedly.
Electrocuting people is nice. It's a fun pastime.
It does give you life lessons, doesn't it?
Yeah, like don't touch electricity. If somebody's actually been electrocuted, you don't touch them. I learned that from Street Fighter. If
your dad is murdered, avenge him in some kind of fighting tournament.
Yeah.
So, these are things that we all use in everyday life. It started out in the arcades. After that, it started to be ported to the home systems, and the first system to get it was the Super Nintendo. In fact, it was kind of the main reason to buy a Super Nintendo when it came out. And that was the original Street Fighter 2 that was in the arcade. It wasn't really enhanced in any way at the time, but it was absolutely amazing to have this game on a home system.
For the Super Nintendo, which didn't really have as much power behind it as the Mega Drive in terms of speed, it was still actually...
the processor speed wasn't quite...
But it really helped shine the console as a platform.
Like the palette and like,
the palette.
The palette. Yeah. The palette. So yeah, the SNES had a better colour palette than the Mega Drive, and it really showed through in a game like Street Fighter 2. So yeah, it was, and obviously it wasn't on the Mega Drive, so people would buy the Super Nintendo just for it.
But it later was.
Oh yes.
Here we have one of the versions, which is Street Fighter 2 Special Champion Edition. So unlike the arcade, which only had 8 characters, this one's got 12.
So the extra characters were the bosses from the first version that weren't playable.
And eventually they started bringing in new, like all the moves from the arcade as well, which was really good. Now there is a slight problem with this. So this is the one that I grew up with because I had a Mega Drive. But the problem is very evident when you actually look at the differences between the two consoles. So first of all, we have the controller for the Super Nintendo. Now one of the things you'll notice is we have 4 buttons over here and 2 shoulder buttons. That's 6 buttons. There's quite a lot of buttons, and that matches the amount that you have on the arcade. And this was a brilliant idea on behalf of Nintendo, which meant that Street Fighter was ported really easily. However, when you look at the Mega Drive version, there's only 3. Street Fighter became so popular, it actually necessitated Sega to... Necessitated. Right, okay, so we're even now. To add more buttons.
Yeah, and originally you had to press start to switch between punches and kicks, which in the heat of a battle is ridiculous, so you really had to get that.
So they did end up with 6 button controllers, and then that became the standard.
Yeah.
Which also helped Mortal Kombat when that later came out on the system as well.
Yeah, I mean Street Fighter 2 kind of pioneered having different strengths of punch and kick. There was actually 3 different strengths of punch and 3 different strengths of kick, each with an individual button, and that's kind of started these multi-button pads, and yeah, hence we got one for the Mega Drive as well.
Plus more, that game. Plus more buttons means more interesting combos.
Exactly.
As well,
so, the one thing that did annoy me about the SNES version, the Mega Drive version is actually, I think, a better pad to play Street Fighter with, because all the buttons are on the face of the pad, so they're easy to access with your hands. Whereas the SNES has the 2 bumpers, L and R, which are punch and kick, heavy punch and kick by default. I find that a bit difficult to play with when you're trying to do special moves, which need you to do like a quarter circle roll on the D-pad and then hit a punch button. I find it easier to have that as a face button, but you can remap the buttons. But it is a little bit better with the Mega Drive pad because everything is on the face of it.
Now, interestingly, the PlayStation did end up with a special edition controller for it. So we have one here.
The PlayStation 2.
I've also just broken the side of the box, so I do apologise. It was already broken, it's just fallen off. And in this nice shiny packet...
We'll fix it, we'll fix it.
We have this. So this is a special edition anniversary controller for Street Fighter. And one of the things it does is it just remaps all of the buttons that you would get for a normal PlayStation controller, you know,
onto the face.
Yeah. So your L and R buttons are actually on the very front, so it just makes it a lot easier as a fighting game.
And you got quite one cool little picture of Akuma from one of the characters from the Street Fighter games on the front there. It's basically very similar to a Sega Saturn pad. It's not exactly the same, but it's very similar. I mean, most people will say the Sega Saturn controller is the best 2D fighting game controller you can get, and that is basically really close to that sort of pad.
But you get to a point where, you know, Sega changed their controller, and there's even a PlayStation controller that's just matched up to just play better with it. That's how important it was.
People would specifically buy this controller and they would refuse to play it with the original one, so they've got this to do that with and pull off the moves. It's a lot easier to do so.
So how about you? What's the format that you've got here?
Yeah, mine's kind of
disc-based.
Well, it's disc-based, as you can see right here. It's not. I don't want to say it's completely obscure because it was one of the reasons to buy this system when it came out. But mine's Super Street Fighter 2. So there were different variations of Street Fighter 2. We've already seen that there was Street Fighter 2. Then there was Special Championship Edition on the Mega Drive, which is actually Street Fighter 2 Hyper Fighting, which came out in the arcades, which had a few more moves, and as Al said, you had the extra characters to play as.
Are you lost yet?
Yeah, it's got a very random history of just updates that came out over and over again. But there was yet another version after Hyper Fighting, which was Super Street Fighter 2, which added 4 completely new characters and things like super combos and a few more moves and different colours of costume variations and things like that. And then there was Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, which was yet another version of Street Fighter 2 that was an enhancement to Super Street Fighter 2.
And I think it was probably the most popular of all of them, to be honest.
It's the ultimate.
Well-known.
Yeah, it's the ultimate version. Again, it got Super Street Fighter 2. There was a Mega Drive version, a SNES version. It came out on most of the viable sort of formats.
It was a lot faster as well.
It was, yeah. You could choose the speed,
which was huge.
And there was secret characters in the Turbo version. One called Akuma, who was the guy that was on that controller that we just looked at. But this is the 3DO version. So the 3DO is quite an obscure console that kind of failed quite miserably because it was stupidly expensive, but it was really powerful at the time. We don't want to go into too much detail about the 3DO because there'll probably be a Console Shock episode about it, but it got a version of Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. It was basically the only console around that could handle Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. I mean, Street Fighter 2 pushed the 16-bit consoles already. Yeah. And this just was the graphics have been redrawn. It was just a lot nicer, more colourful, more animation. As I mentioned, the Mega Drive processor did get Super Street Fighter 2, but it was cut down a little bit to be able to run on those systems. This is basically pretty close to arcade perfect. It's not arcade perfect, but it's pretty close. And it plays really, really well. It's actually a little bit easier than the arcade version, which I kind of like. And it's got a great soundtrack that's remixed from the arcade version because it's running it directly off the CD audio tracks. And it just looks fantastic. At the time, it was by far the best home version of Street Fighter 2 you could get. And that's the 3DO version. It's fairly common. It was probably one of the best games on the 3D. In fact, it might be the best game. It's definitely better than Plumbers Don't Wear Ties.
Pretty much everything is better than Plumbers Don't Wear Ties.
I was a big fan of that. I'm hoping for Plumbers Don't Wear Ties Turbo, but I'm not sure what the chances of that are. So yeah, the 3DO
Special Championship Edition.
Yeah, hyper and like super Plumbers Don't Wear Ties. But the controller of the 3DO is kind of like that Special Edition PS2 one. It's got really good D-pad for doing the diagonal actions for the special moves. And yeah, I really would recommend the 3DO version, although it's not completely arcade perfect. There's one more version that probably is
one more.
There's one more. So you know about the Dreamcast, right?
Of course.
Duh. Because me and Al are quite big Sega fanboys. Now, the Dreamcast got its own version of Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, only in Japan. And it's got a lovely title. It's Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo X Grandmaster Challenge. Wow. Exactly.
It's so unfair that they still managed to get stuff that we couldn't.
Exactly. I mean, that would have been really big for the Dreamcast because we all love Street Fighter over here.
Although the Dreamcast wasn't really that well loved at the time.
Unfortunately, no. People waiting for the PS2.
It could have been a lost cause anyway.
We could really go crazy on the Dreamcast.
Actually, guys, sorry to interject there, but it was actually called Super Street Fighter 2 X for Matching Service Grandmaster Challenge.
There we go.
It's the longest name for any Street Fighter game, and it's a bit dumb.
Yeah, Matching Service was actually the name of the. I mean, we had Dream Arena in the UK, which is the online gaming function of the Dreamcast because it had a modem. In Japan,
it was like an online dating thing as well.
It does, yeah. Dream Arena, yeah. It's really. I thought it was a terrible name at the time. Sega Net was what the Americans got, which sounds cool.
Yeah.
Sega Net. Perfect. But yeah, you could play it over the internet in Japan against other people, which is the first time you could do that with a Street Fighter game. And that service to do that was called the Matching Service. Again, yeah, it does sound like a dating thing. Yeah. But yeah, it was basically a completely arcade perfect version of Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. Because the Dreamcast was obviously compared to the arcade cabinet would have been like stupidly more powerful. So yeah, I would recommend seeking out the Japanese version. It's very rare and very expensive though, because it was never released over here. And I think it was released in very small quantities in Japan because by that time people had moved on to, well, there was Street Fighter Alpha and there was Soul Calibur and Tekken and things like that.
And Mortal Kombat.
And Mortal Kombat, of course, as well. So Super Street Fighter 2 was kind of in a limbo phase at that stage before we all got nostalgic about it. But yeah, that's the perfect version.
Okay guys, now me and Dan are going to talk about our Street Fighter memories. Now, I must have been, I don't know, maybe 10 or 11 when I got my Amiga 600. Thank you very much, Dad, for that. That was my Christmas present back in 1991 maybe, I don't know, I can't really remember. But the point is, the first one, actually I got two games. I got Jack Nicklaus Golf. Is that yeah? Jack Nicholson?
Jack Nicklaus Golf.
Jack Nicholson? The fella from Batman, anyway.
Golf would be a great game.
Anyway, the fella from Batman, I got his golf show. But I also got Street Fighter. Street Fighter 2, that was it, for my Amiga, and I absolutely loved it. I haven't got the Amiga one here, because obviously I sold that years ago. But, what's good about it, it's on 4 discs. So you had a great opportunity between bouts. You could take one disc out and you had to put in other discs. So the benefits of that was it gave you an opportunity to make tea, scratch your bum,
Drop your loading.
yeah, general things like that. So what was generally quite good about it, it was just the time you got to sort of chill out, relax while the games were loading. And I think Trevor over there,
Hello.
hi, he sort of reminded me of how wasn't quite as fast as the Super Nintendo version.
I remember back in the day, Mega Bowl in Streatham, they had the proper Championship Edition, like all hooked up, 4 cabinets, massive screens, a lot, and it was a Super Street Fighter Championship Edition time. And I'd go down there like 3 times a week just to play against like randoms, really. I mean, that was a good thing about the arcades back then, is that, you know, it wasn't.
You met
quite...
some weirdos, didn't you?
You met some weirdos. You meet some weirdos. You meet some weirdos all the time. You do. There are
all these weirdos are now on the internet finding. Yeah, they were in the arcade then. Now they're on the internet.
Well, yes, but it was a great time in the arcade. I think Street Fighter 2 really was the epitome of like, you know, arcade culture, which I love. Unfortunately, nowadays there's really nowhere similar to that to go around to. Although I do really recommend the place. I believe it's in Hoxton. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. But do look them up online. They're called the Heart of Gaming, and they're like where all the arcades from the old Trocadero and such went to die. Trocadero as well. That was a great place back in the day.
Sega World.
Back in Sega World there. Great stuff. Pants now. Check out Heart of Gaming as well, because that's where like you want to go if you want to play like something like proper old school Street Fighter 2. That's where you want to go.
So thank you everybody for watching our 3rd episode. You know, hope it brought back a lot of memories for Street Fighter 2 and perhaps educated you a little bit as well.
Yeah, I mean the individual games themselves probably warrant an episode to themselves, but we'll probably do that a little bit later down the line. We just wanted to give you an overview of some of our particular highlights and favourites. Fighters are a big 2D fighters are I'm a big fan of them, so we'll probably have quite a lot of them further down the line.
Yeah. So yeah, you guys have been on the internet long enough. You need to know, you know, just to share, subscribe, all that kind of jazz.
And come and visit M&M Games in Croydon as well, where you can get all this lovely stuff.
You know, Evil Ryu was actually a fluke. Originally, oh damn it!
Right, let's go down.
You literally just started this.
You son of a bitch!
Sorry, it was on the way.
Oh!
That was good, that.
Sponsored by Domino's.